Hare Krishna. Today we have with us Candrasekhara, Srila Prabhupada disciple from 1972. We want to ask him some questions regarding prison preaching. He has been involved with the prison ministry for over 2 decades. So he is with us today in Mayapur, and we would like to find out some answers about this wonderful program, about your the beginning of the prison preaching ministry.
Sure. Srila Prabhupada, His Divine Grace Mahapatita Pavanadev, he began prison preaching. And it was before he came to America, before he found a receptive audience at 26 2nd Avenue, or Hippie Hill in San Francisco. He found a receptive audience at Tihar Jail in Janakpur, New Delhi. That was in 1962. Before he began ISKCON, Prabhupada wrote to his godbrother, Sri Puri Maharaj, that I have great hope for rectifying the characters of these young men at Tihar, and that they can become ideal characters. So every religious tradition shows some concern for prisoners, including Srila Prabhupada, including the Gaudiya tradition. So Srila Prabhupada was preaching enthusiastically there. He then came to the States. Eventually their prison preaching began in 1971 in ISKCON, in India and America the same year. In 1971, Prabhupada went to Ahmedabad jail, where he was invited to speak. He mentioned that, those of you remember, I was there at Gandhi's room, which he said is considered a sacred place these days. And 1971, in Philadelphia, Nayana Biram, he also began prison preaching work. Prabhupada encouraged him. He said, this is solid work. Go on preaching to the inmates and at mental hospitals as well, if possible.
Can you tell us your involvement? How did you begin this involvement?
Well, it was the late 80s. That's when I began prison preaching. Vishnu Janaswamy was preaching in San Antonio. I was there at Bihar County Jail in 71. That's when I joined. Maharaj shaved me up. The devotees from Austin came down, Adidev, Murti, Harasar, and some others, Pulastya. And we had a big program at Bihar County Jail, B-E-X-A-R. A-R is pronounced Bihar. So Jayananda was also involved in prison preaching in the early 70s. He went to one jail. He said, Prabhus, make sure there's hot halava. And so halfway to the prison, he said, let's eat the halava now. They said, Jayananda Prabhu, but if we eat the halava, it won't be for there won't be any for the inmates. He said, we can't take food into the prison. This is for us. And so they had a big festival before going to the prison. That was his plan all along. Tamal Krishna was preaching at El Reno Federal Jail in Oklahoma. And Rupanuga was preaching in jails in Tennessee. So there was some prison preaching in ISKCON before I became involved, but no big programs. It was sporadic. So what happened was in the late 80s, my wife had passed away and I was a single father. I was caring for my child, but I had no missionary work. And it was as if I just couldn't breathe. And I prayed very feelingly to give me some direction and let me do something significant for Srila Prabhupada. So what happened was I had an idea where I saw the books laying around the temple I was at. It was New Orleans at the time. And the Bhagavatams were a little worn, they weren't being read. I asked the temple president, can I send these books to prisons? And he said yes. So that's how I began. So I packed up all these books, I sent them out, and I hoped to hear replies from inmates within a few weeks. It took 1 year before I got my first reply. But in the meantime, I contacted the BBT. I asked them to send any letters from inmates to me. I contacted temples. Please send me your inmate letters. I'll answer them. And I listed myself in resource guides. There are prison advocacy groups. If you're interested in Buddhism, contact these people. If you're interested in Christianity, if you're interested in yoga meditation, contact Bhakti Yoga Resources. And so we offer free books on devotional yoga and mantra meditation, our newsletter, correspondence. No female pen pals are available, however. And so in this way I've written over 32,000 handwritten letters to inmates over the years. I think my kids, they thought I made a living writing letters. I was writing quite a few letters, and so Prabhupada said, I have time to reply each and every letter. So if Prabhupada, then certainly I can do that. So our focus in America is to visit prisons when possible. We write letters. Prabhupada said, keep Mr. Fugate alive through correspondence. This was early on in the movement when there wasn't devotees everywhere. Keep Mr. Fugate alive through correspondence. So we try to keep the prisoners' Krishna consciousness alive through correspondence. We give them books, we get them japa beads, and we lobby for vegetarian diets. We've given prison administrators lots of headaches over the years, getting the inmates the proper religious vegetarian diet. So that's how it began. There was some prison preaching early on. Things started up. A team came together, Shama Priya Devi Dasi, who was affectionately known as Mama Shama, to the prisoners. She passed away April 16th, 2009. At her ceremony, her disappearance ceremony, I said that she had 500 sons, and they all missed her very much. So she was a matriarch in ISKCON prison ministry. We've lost Muktakesh Das, Shama Priya Devi, and Bhakta Jerry, who were all stalwarts in prison preaching. So over the years, teams of preachers have come together. Mother Bhakti Lata has taken over in Florida, in Alachua, Florida now, that Shama Priya turned things over to her. And she is a tremendous devotional dynamo, Bhakti Lata. We're deeply appreciative. We had lost the password to someone ran away with the password to our website. She got it together. The website's established, ISKCONPrisonMinistry.com, and she's the other part of preaching in America.
What about India? Can you tell us about your preaching programs in India?
Yes. One time I was in Vrindavan, and I said, let's go to a prison. So Dinabandhu had been active, Daiva Shakti had been active, Sarvabhauma had been active in that area. Mathura and some other jails I'm not familiar with. So we went to Agra Central Jail. So we cleared security, and the first thing the devotee said to me was, let's go see the Goshaw. I said, what? The Goshaw? He said, yes, they caught some man stealing cows and they threw him in jail and kept the cows. So we went to see one of the most beautiful Goshaws I've ever seen. The cows were all different colors. They were gray, they were brown, they were white, and it just looked like Vrindavan. So as I'm looking at the cows, hearing about the cows, I look over and there's a bush just as wide as can be, big, round, two of them, big, beautiful Tulsi plants. And so the inmates worship Tulsi, they circumambulate Tulsi, they worship they care for the cows, so that's how things began. So this person was spotless. There wasn't a thing out of place. It's 12 acres. We started to walk, and I said, "What's that?" And he said, "That's spinach." I go, "What's that?" And he said, "Those are potatoes." So they cultivate the land in prison. As we continued, and it looked beautiful. I have a picture of it. It looks like lush Vrindavan landscape. We continued, and I saw an open-air Vrindavan style temple, a small temple about as long as a train car, with coal and madanga. There were inmates having kirtan there. So I went, I paid my respects, and I looked up, and there in the center altar is Krishna Balaram. There was Gaurnitai and Radhesham. And so I was very pleased. So we continued, and I heard some kirtan. I said, "Oh, that's very nice. They're playing kirtan for us because we're visiting here today." And he goes, "Oh, no. We walked through the gate. There's a tall wall. We couldn't see. So we entered a courtyard. There's a large neem tree. There were several hundred inmates there. It looked like the sages of Naimisharanya. The turban, long beards. They're all sitting like yogis, and they were having kirtan." And I said, "Prabhu, can the inmates here, can they eat vegetarian food?" And he laughed, the devotee laughed. He said, everybody who wants prasadam here gets prasadam. That's what can happen in India. That's thanks to Daiva Shakti, Dinabandhu, and the other devotees out of Braj, and others out of Braj. That can happen all over India. Now, in Maharashtra, it's a matter of calling the prison. We're here, We'd like to have a program. Yes, please come Tuesday. So that's how easy it is in parts of India. Now I understand in Bengal there's some sensitivity with the government, and when there was a Hindu-Muslim tension, Mother Bhakti Mai Vishanti had some difficulty in South India because they didn't want to introduce anything to the inmates that looked like religion. But she is an empowered devotee preaching out of Chennai, and there's prison preaching going on all over South India now. Temples that I didn't know existed, that I'm meeting devotees here in Mayapur who are telling me we have big prison preaching programs. I don't see them listed in the BTG that I have. And so my point is that there's all kinds of big programs going on, big beautiful temples, prison preaching in South India, in a sensitive area, just because of the strength and willpower of devotees like Bhakti Mai Vishanti and others. So India is a ripe field. We can show them our pictures of very large prison preaching functions. The officials can be won over, and we can preach very easily all over India, and we need to. Around the world, is there a preaching project going on in your country, in your temple? We need to know that. His Holiness Chandramali Swami, His Holiness Subhag Swami, and a host of other leaders know about some prison work. We need to hear from devotees about what they're doing. For one, we want to produce a handbook to let devotees know how to begin prison preaching. There might be a little confusion. That varies country to country, sometimes prison to prison. So we need to hear from others. We know of some programs, and we're trying to contact those devotees. Whether you have a prison program or not, we need to hear from devotees. If you don't, we can help you begin. If you do, we need to know how you began in your own country. So for the government, the college student and the inmates are just as important because they're citizens. Prabhupada says that the government just doesn't want punitive system, but that the inmates should be benefited. So that's where we came in. We can offer real rehabilitation. Prabhupada told Lieutenant Mosey in Chicago that give us some facilities here in Chicago, give us a building, let us perform Sankirtan, prasadam distribution, and education. That will cure crime. So if we care about society, our children, and each other, we have to address this issue of crime. So the real rehabilitation are Srila Prabhupada's books, Harinam, friendship with the devotees, this education, non-violent diet. The inmates are profoundly affected by Srila Prabhupada's books and by the kindness of the Vaishnavas. So we want the prison preaching to go worldwide. If you know of something going on, we need to hear from you.
In one of our earlier conversations, you mentioned something about Prabhupada's miracle. What did you mean with that?
Well, this is a special miracle, but I see miracles all the time. Here's my miracle, right here. He's a tough-looking fellow. This is before. This is the before picture, before he ever chanted Hare Krishna. This is Ben. He, at this point, is an angry, hate-filled white supremacist. So a white supremacist is someone typically in the States, of course there are other places in Europe around the world, who hate brown races, perhaps Jewish tradition, blacks, Mexican, this and that. So he was he was a part of the Aryan Nation, which is a specifically violent white supremacist group out of Arizona, and he committed quite a vicious crime. So Bhakta Ben was at a low point in his life, trying to numb the pain of being in jail for the rest of his life, when he prayed very feelingly for some direction. In due course, he came in contact with a devotee who had Prabhupada's books. He contacted us and we got him Prabhupada's books. After a very short time of writing to me, this is what Bhakta Ben wrote in just one of his letters. He said to me, "You are quite right, for a miracle has indeed taken place in my life. When we first began to correspond, I was very much a hate-filled, white supremacist gangster. As a reminder, all you have to do is look at the 8x10 portrait, which shows my tattoos, and me in the UCSO stripes. The hatred boils right out of my eyes. But by the mercy of Krishna, Prabhupada, you, and all of IPM, I am a changed person. I am now your menial servant who aspires to one day become a devotee. Lord Sri Nityananda's mercy is very unlimited. He accepted me before I even realized who I was or what I needed. And what to say of Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu, who is the savior of the most fallen? I believe the whole process is called Chaito Darpana Marjanam, which is the process of devotional service. Where is the difficulty? It is such a simple process." So that's one excerpt from one of his letters. I see miracles like this throughout the month. Inmates write to me similar letters that touch the hearts of anybody who reads them. And they realize Srila Prabhupada's purifying potency. One time we put together a very nice Vyas Puj homage of just inmate homages. And His Holiness Chandramali Swami said, "These have touched my hearts more than the typical yearly homages that he runs across." So their goodness is fascinating, even to the wicked. So Srila Prabhupada's goodness is fascinating to dear Adir, to those who are peaceful and those who are rogues. So we're deeply appreciative of Srila Prabhupada, his example in approaching inmates, and we want to follow in his footsteps.
You said that this prison preaching started even before ISKCON was founded. What about Lord Chaitanya? Did he ever go to prisons?
Did he ever go to prison? We don't see that in any place in the Chaitanya Charitamrita or the Chaitanya Bhagavat. However, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, quoting Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, says, "Whenever someone takes Sankirtan to a place it's never been, I personally accompany them." So it certainly feels like that to us. We have different focuses in ISKCON. We write, we send books. We also visit prisons. It's a fascinating experience, and it feels as if, to the preachers and to the men and to the staff, that there's something very special happening. I take it that it's the appearance of the holy names and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself. If you take Sankirtan somewhere where it's never been before, I personally accompany you. This is the statement of Lord Chaitanya. And I should tell you one other story, if you don't mind. People know Srila Prabhupada's, how difficult it was for Srila Prabhupada to come to the States. First of all, the Congress in America had to repeal the Exclusion of Orientals Act, which was from 1924. It was repealed in 65. Otherwise, he would have had a very difficult time coming. He had to have a sponsor. Do we know who his sponsor was? Yeah, we know the story. Mr. Agarwal, the businessman out of Mathura, his son Gopal in Butler, Pennsylvania. He had to have a P form, no objection certificate. He had to have passage. At first, Sumati Maharaji said no, out of a sisterly or motherly affection. What will you do there? You'll be 70. What will you eat? Who will care for you? But still, he got free steamship passage. But what about his visa? He needed a visa. Do you know that story? Do you know the story of how Prabhupada got his visa? Most devotees have never heard this story before. And without prison preaching, Prabhupada would not have been able to come to America. That's how I look at it, and this is why. So to come to America, a little sensitive. The act had just been repealed, so Prabhupada had to he had to have one letter of recommendation to offer to the American Embassy to apply for his visa from someone of stature. So he approached the former president of India, Dr. Radhakrishna. They were colleagues and contemporaries and had shared brotherly affection. So Prabhupada, you provide this one letter so that I can take the letter to the American Embassy and apply for my visa. I have this order by my spiritual master that I must go to the West. So he said no. He said no. Probably in the same mood as Mother Sumati Morarji, that he had some concern. So Prabhupada became indignant. He became upset. He said, what are you? You're supposed to be a big government officer. But what are you actually doing for the benefit of the prisoners of state? Because Prabhupada had been preaching to inmates at that time. And so he was concerned. The government has to offer some rehabilitation. So for some reason, Prabhupada said, so Dr. Radhakrishna said, oh, so then I will arrange one prison program at Midnapore Central Jail. And we will see how things go. And we will see about your letter of recommendation at that time. So Prabhupada said, very good. So a program was arranged. And everybody loved Prabhupada, as you might imagine. The administrators, the staff, and the inmates. And it was a program was a big success. So, of course, the word got back to Dr. Radhakrishna, and he wrote that letter of recommendation. Person of stature, Prabhupada took it to the American Embassy and got his visa, without which he would have never been able to get on that boat, that cargo boat, and come over. So every town and village means every town and village. So when there's villages of 5,000 men, 5,000 women, or in the Mathura jail, it's a mix. When we do our programs at the Mathura jail, the ladies come with their children, and the men come too, and they both here. So in the prisons I've been in, there's thousands of inmates. So every town and village means every soul's precious, and we should offer access to this very valuable process of self-realization to everyone. Ladies, men, prisoners, college boys, everybody should have access. So we cannot neglect these villages. We have had so much success. Everywhere we go, everywhere we try, whether it's Slovenia, Croatia, Spain, the Philippines, Malaysia, India, everywhere we go, everyone who tries to do some prison preaching, we get a success story. That's the receptivity of the inmates, the ladies and gentlemen, in the prisons around the world. It's practically guaranteed that there'll be someone who will enliven you in your preaching spirit, and truly you can feel that Lord Caitanya is making his appearance in these places.
So you're telling us this connection that Prabhupada had even before ISKCON was created, and the importance of his prison preaching coming to America and the influence that had in the recommendation letter. What about Prabhupada going into a jail? I think you mentioned it earlier, but can you tell us more in detail of what happened when Prabhupada went to the prison program?
I don't know that there's a lot to mention. I don't know that Prabhupada spoke that much about it. Just that hearing your question, I'm thinking, we're here in Mayapur, not too far from here is Ramakeli. And in Ramakeli there's one very unique building. It's square with a central dome, and that's where Sanatana Goswami was housed when he was in jail. So some great acharyas have done time. He escaped. Haridas Thakur, he was also in jail. He told the prisoners, stay as you are. And they became upset. Oh no, what do you mean? No, he said, no. Here in prison, without the distractions of the external world, you're like brahmacharis, you're like living in the ashram here. So stay fixed in Krishna sadhana here. So Prabhupada, from his letter, I didn't see that he mentioned a lot of details about his visit to Ahmedabad. However, he did encourage prison preaching to Nayanabaram and Shamasundar. I think Shamasundar Malti had to go to jail. They thought for 5 years. Prabhupada said, never mind, nothing will happen. In 27 days they were released. Prabhupada asked Shamasundar, why were you sent to jail? He said, Srila Prabhupada, I was selling drugs. Prabhupada said, I also sold drugs. Well, why? That's no reason to go to jail. So So we can see from Srila Prabhupada over the years, before and after beginning his dynamic preaching movement, that he was concerned about every spirit soul, that they not go hungry, that they not go without any access to his books, to the association of the Gaudiyas, to Harinam. So that's our concern, and that's why I've come to India. My kids are grown, and I came to India because I know it's a great preaching field for the prison ministry. There are places we can go right away, and there are places that we need to spend some time working with the officials and developing programs.
Wants to start some prison preaching or wants more information, how can they find out more about what you do and what the ministry does?
There's two things you can do. Here's my email. You're going to like this email. My email is kachorimuki@yahoo.com. Prabhupada had several nicknames when he was a little boy in Calcutta. Kachori Mukhi was one of them. He's a little boy with a vest, and inside his pockets, inside and out, he had kachoris. And one to his mouth, Kachori Mukhi @yahoo.com. KACHORIMUKHI. So please contact me, and you can also contact the Congregational Development Ministry under which we fall. We're wanting to expand. I'm ready and available to offer whatever help I can. So please contact us however you can.
One last question. It seems like there is a lot of pastimes and miracles, as you said, because of this program. We know that we have this book, Holy Jail.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little about that?
Oh, this book, Holy Jail, is an inspiration. Please find His Holiness Chandramali's book, Holy Jail, and read through it. And Salted Bread, about how the devotees in Russia spent time in prison. There was one, Leela was a sex worker. This is the statement of Bhakti Mai Vishanti. She begins her description of Leela. She was a sex worker. But in due course, she became attracted in jail. She was arrested at one of these clubs, dancer and prostitute. Became arrested at one of these clubs and found the Bhagavatam and became attracted to the Bhagavatam and became a proper lady, now with husband and children. So Leela's one miracle. Bhakta Ben is another. There are many in the book that are, we have inmate excerpt letters from around the world explaining how Prabhupada's touched their hearts. This book, Holy Jail, please try to find it. We have it here at the Congregational Development Ministry. Please pick up a book. You'll be inspired. Prabhupada's changing hearts. He's transforming lives.
Hare Krishna.